is their Cordova creator of the Leicester equaliser. El Khanous, how much room does he have here? El Khanous going for goal, and he finds it as well. What a turnaround here at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
4 minutes, Leicester have soaked up so much pressure. Fatawi jinking feet to get beyond his man, and the header from Jamie Vardy makes it 2.
It's Wood should score. Wood Cannockhans. Yes! Yes! Anthony Cannockhans has done it.
Tielemans lining one up. What a goal! What a brilliant goal by Youri Tielemans! And the Leicester City fans go absolutely potty.
Ball in behind Damian Vardy. It's 11. It's heaven for Jamie Vardy. Hold the back page. Hold the front page. A Leicester player has smashed the record.
Good evening and welcome back to Blue Tinted Glasses. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, already on Hub Day, which means it's time for Fox's Den, as it is every Wednesday. And today we've got an interesting discussion, topic, maybe a debate, I don't know, we'll have to see. And it's all about style of play, the style of football, which is a big talking point in football in 2025. You should see our group chats. Jesus Christ. But before we get into it, let's go around and say hello to everybody. And Neil, what's going on, mate?
Yeah, all good. Season's over, but there's still a lot to talk about. And I'm still quite baffled by the lack of action at Leicester City Football Club. What is going on? Yeah,
can you believe it's been like 4 days? No, we've not even had... Have we had an emergency stream? Yeah, we had... Did we? No, we didn't. We haven't had an emergency stream. Oh, no,
I'm kind of disappointed. I was prepping myself. I was like getting ready for all my sort of like one-liners, and no.
He's getting ready for the flag wave. Is the flag coming out when Rude's sacked? Does that come out, mate?
I've mentioned that there might be a turtleneck and some scissors involved. Is all I'm going to say.
Push the boat out. Get a lighter instead, mate. Right, Ragsy, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. I hope you guys are well. Yeah, I'm certainly not surprised in regards to, like, that's just the legacy of King Power these days. But that'll be for another stream. But it's an interesting topic, like, tonight. So, yeah, that should be juicy.
Absolutely. Michael, Tash of the Year, what's going on, mate?
Not a great deal. Busy at work all day. Looking forward to hopping on, chatting some bullshit with you guys. And, yeah, let's crack on.
Okay. Right. So as we said, this is all about style of play, the style of football, and all of that good stuff that everybody talks about now in like I said, in 2025. I'll come to you first, Anil. I'm going to just ask it straight to start the conversation. In your opinion, does the style of football that a club or a team plays, does it matter?
To me, it matters quite a lot. It's actually one of the biggest reasons I got into coaching, because when I was a lad, I used to play, and what used to really piss me off is that, like, I tried to get the ball and play with it, and they'd be like, "What are you doing? Just pump it forward, play it long." And I was like, "Have you not seen like the most successful teams?" At the time, it was like AC Milan and stuff like that, playing this beautiful football. But someone's put in the comments there, which is really good. Brendan Fowler there says, "Of course, style of play matters. It just doesn't matter as much as results." I think that is ultimately the TLDR. But for me, yes, it does. Because at the end of the day, football is a hobby, right? We're just watching 22 blokes kick a bit of leather around a grass pitch, right? It's a hobby, right? It's not that serious, even though we take it very seriously. So for me, it's also entertainment. And I think if you're watching a game and it's not entertaining, that is the worst. And I have to say that I think this season, that streak of games under Rude, I think the reason why we want him out of the club so much isn't the results. Actually, bizarrely, it's because we couldn't even score a goal. It was just awful to watch. It was just like, you might as well. It says it all that we were just asking each other, what are your top 3 favorite Nando's? That's where the discussion went to, and that was more interesting than the football. So for me, yeah, it matters a lot.
Can I just chime in here straight away?
Yeah.
And then just to pose another question back at you. Coming at this conversation quite blind, I haven't really ever given it much thought, whether it's something that really matters with me. So I'm hoping to learn plenty from you guys, if anything. Does having a style of play mean that you can't deviate from plan A to plan B. I'll use Ange Postecoglou as an example at Spurs. He very much was like, nah, this is the style of play. And then obviously his only success was when he came and actually used a plan that we never knew would be the case. So you're shaking your head there. It's actually a style of play is having multiple ways to play a game. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's just being thick. That's just like, playing any sort of video game or playing sort of poker, and every single time you go all in, and you're losing. You're like, no, it must be everyone else that's wrong. It's not me. I'm playing it right. I'm definitely playing poker brilliantly. Like, no, you got to figure out what it is. There's like a sort of meta game going on here. So I have to say that is something that does frustrate me slightly. I will say from a kind of coaching point of view, I do sort of understand it in some regard, because when you're trying to coach patterns of play and positional play, especially, it's like if you deviate it from it, the problem is that like people pick up bad habits and they won't learn what you're supposed to do. But then the issue the other way is that then quite quickly you'll get a team that's pretty much got it, or they're 90% of the way there, but that plan isn't working, and you can't be so stubborn. I have to say that is the thing that annoyed me about Enzo. But I felt like Enzo was really good, but there were many games that would get to like minute 70, and it's like, all right, Enzo, you've proved your point, right? We're completely dominating the game. The game is parked in their half, right? The other team are doing nothing except the odd breakaway attack. But now just frigging take off a defender and put another striker up there, play a bit more 50-50 ball, right? Because you've actually proved that your style of play has worked. You're winning the battle, now you need to win the war, kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I would answer to you, Michael. But that is something that I know. But that's a really good question. Maybe the others should answer it.
Well, Ragsy, we're going to come to the different styles in a second, but there's a comment here from Scotty saying if the style of football is tippy-tappy, boring shite, then keep it. But what I want to take from this comment, mate, is, of course, winning is all that matters, but I suppose the style of play that you implement might help you win, might get you to that goal of winning a game. Talk to me on that.
Ultimately, when push comes to shove, the style of play doesn't really matter to me, but you have to look at something. For me, like, results is paramount, and I can see a future and I can see longevity in what we're doing if I full well know, when I look back at the wins and I look back at us having remits and getting over that line and going, yeah, this works. Like when we first got promoted, like back in 2014, and it was like we implemented a counter-attacking style of play. But that was in a different era where teams were just sort of going box to box, and then we moved into like winning the league, and there was not one fan that wasn't entertained, but that was not exactly like an intricate, advanced style of play, because we were in an era alongside the Mourinhos, alongside the Contes. But ever since then, football has evolved, and in comes Pep, in comes Klopp, and they ultimately show up the rest of English football to dictate control of possession and then intricately carve teams apart in the way that they do. And everybody else has had to try and keep up with it, because they're looking to them and going, well, that's the most effective style to play. So it's not necessarily a specific style that I'm always sort of leaning towards. I'm just looking in whatever era that we're in, like this one seems to be the most effective. So when I look at us and go, well, we're currently still in this era, so therefore I looked at Enzo Ball more, especially when in the championship we were absolutely bossed it. And yes, there were flaws, and yes, there were setbacks, but ultimately we passed our remit and we won the championship. And I was just like, I was willing to look at that and keep that going. And when you look to, I think then there's certain fans that sort of look back at 2014-15 and go, why can't we play like that? We used to be so good. Well, football's moved on since then. You can't just sort of sit in, lump a ball up to Jamie when he's not in his prime anymore. He doesn't have his that extra yard of pace to go and like run in behind. And you need the players to be able to do that effectively. If we could do that and we had the striker or we had the player personnel to go ahead and do it, then by all means do whatever works. But like over the long run and over like the course of the season and just for future seasons, having that base to know possession-based football is the way to go to ultimately get better results over the long run. That's the way you really got to head to.
I mean, Michael, like 10 years ago, I'll say when Pep Guardiola first came into the country, I think that was the the shift in England, because now you look around the Premier League and you see all sorts of clubs and managers trying to implement their own style, sometimes to the detriment of results. Sometimes it works very well, takes some time. But for me, mate, like, because I'm like you, I don't really think about it too much, and I actually think about style of play very simply. Like, my contribution to the analysis that Anil does is, Ricardo is inverting. This is the formation. That's as far as I go. But there was a clear shift in football, Mike. I'm sure you noticed it as well. When Pep came into the country, it had a big influence on managers and coaches and clubs.
Of course, there has been, because they were the team at the top of the tree, right? You want to then sort of copy and mimic that, but then I guess how to knock them off of their perch is maybe not to try and become them, but be something different. And I guess the nearest thing we've had to that since was probably might be Forest. They maybe got the closest. Klopp obviously battled him for many years with a different style. So I guess to bring it back to the conversation of does this style of football matter? I guess it really depends on where you sit in the pecking order as a football team. Real Madrid, for example, I see them as Vibes FC, let's call them. They went, let's just cram £1 billion of players onto a pitch and just they will figure it out. And they've kind of done that for maybe a decade to incredible success, however many Champions League those star players won together. And then I guess on a smaller scale, a Brighton, and even a larger scale, Ajax. I'll use Ajax as the example. Their style of football is being dragged down from under eights all the way through. They play the exact same way, and that's just how it is. I don't. To bring it to the question, I don't know if there is an exact answer to this. I guess my answer is you need to do it all. I'm really not sure.
I mean, Anil, there's a comment here from Tony that says we play next season with great style and we are halfway down the championship. Their manager is toast. Now, I don't know what style exactly Tony's referring to, but if he is referring to more of the Enzo, Russell Martin style of football, Anil, well, actually, that style of football, when you have a superior squad, is actually proven to work and be very effective. Look at Leicester last season, title winners. Look at Southampton. I know they finished 4th, but they were promoted. It does. I mean, it does work in there if you have the right players for it. But I suppose that's the same with any style. You have to have the players to implement what the manager wants to do.
For sure. I guess it does come to results as well. But the thing is that I know I've said this a few times, which is that I think if I see the team going out there, giving everything and actually playing good stuff, to me, I'm actually not that bothered about the result, which might be kind of controversial to say.
Very controversial.
Yeah. but for me, it is. I'd rather see that than teams that literally park the bus for 90 minutes and get one fluky goal on a counter-attack. That's what I didn't like about watching Steve Cooper's style. It was just like, you hold on for dear life and maybe you'll get something. If you do, just hold on. I remember against Bournemouth, we had that when Cooper was in charge. We had a half decent first half. Facundo scored an outrageous goal. And in the second half, it was just non-stop pressure. You just saw like the XG going through the roof for Bournemouth. No attempt to try and play football whatsoever. They should have scored and it got ruled out. And just for me, I mean, fair enough. I mean, he won the game, so what does it matter? But for me, no, I don't think it's good. And look, I guess I see the thing as well as like, realistically with Leicester, what is this club capable of doing? I've already won the Premier League, we won the FA Cup, and now unfortunately because of decisions made, by the people that own it, I don't see us having too much success. Maybe we can get to the Premier League again. So I don't know. Look, for me, I appreciate it's not for everyone, right? But as I say, it's a hobby, and for me, if you're just watching, even if you're winning, if it's just a totally crap team, it's not something I enjoy. But of course, winning does definitely make you feel better about it. But it's like sometimes I've even seen us win games and you think, yeah, we won the game, but we were awful, to be honest with you, and we were lucky to get away with it. So I am, I guess, a bit more of a performance FC, but within reason.
Could you get by with, instead of having this specific approach to a game, trying to think, let's use Pep Guardiola as an example. Could you not get by actually looking at how your opponents play and then I mean, I guess that's not good for the players. They might not be wanting to join that system, let's say, but then constantly sort of tweaking and adapting to the team you're playing against. I'm trying to think of an example that maybe the closest to that might be Brentford. Let's say they don't have. I don't believe they have the set style. They just look at who they're playing against and go, all right, well, that's their weakness. Let's attack that. This is where they're going to attack us. Let's strengthen that position.
Yeah, but Brentford is the one, and they've definitely been managers. Like, I have to say, I think Unai Emery's quite good at it as well. Not necessarily in the league, but the reason why he's got such a good European record is you can tell that he looks at how the other team's going to play, and he will very specifically come up with a plan. Like, I don't know if you saw, for example, against PSG, even though they conceded, because they actually found something and it almost worked, and they were arguably unlucky not to get through. So that is like really good.
And it's mental that someone like Mikel Arteta didn't look at. Sorry to interrupt. Didn't look at that and say this is how they got their success. He stayed wedded to his system and ultimately scored a goal. Guys.
Well, look, I think multiple styles of play is important, but I think when we come to it, it's like some people they just don't care. They just would be happy seeing, like I say, you just win at all costs. So it doesn't matter if it's a dour game. Other people wouldn't. I think for me, something that I harken back to is like I remember this game quite vividly, even though it was like one of the most boring games I've ever been to. So season after we win the title, we're playing Middlesbrough at home, and we're starting to go on this bad run, and the game ends 0-0. And I just remember this guy standing next to me. And he just shouts out, this is like in the 88th minute, going, "It's not working, is it?" As Wes Morgan just pumps another long ball aimlessly over the top, and Middlesbrough just easily deal with it. And I just started chuckling to myself because I was like, well, exactly. Because that is where style of play. And it's like, yeah, we won the league of the counter-attack, but now everyone understands what Leicester's strength is. So everyone's nullifying us. And it's like we have to evolve as a team. We have to start thinking of a way of beating teams that are actually respecting us. So that's why I think it is important. But it's a nuanced topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Ragsy, there's a comment here that I wanted to bring up, and it says, is it style or is it certain values held by a football club being embodied by the players on the pitch? I've seen Martinez and Dyche, polar opposites, but both had the Everton fight that I demand. I mean, I mentioned a second ago, Ragsy, that the players, you need, I suppose, certain players to play certain ways. Like, for example, when I keep seeing people talk about Dyche, right? Because they say, oh, he's pragmatic, he'll shore up the defence and all of this, they'll have more fight. But I don't think, I think Russell Martin is better suited for our current squad, than a Dyche, because I don't think we have the players to play Dyche ball. I don't think they fight enough, and I don't think they're fit enough and all of this.
I don't think, but I just think we've got an inherently crap squad that is not good enough to play either ball. Like, they're not, like, they won't adhere to like Dyche ball.
Low the mood.
You want to play it. They may like going with Russell Martin, and then when they try to pull it off in the Premier League, which is ultimately where we want to be, it will fall flat on its face because we simply don't have the players that's good enough to do it. So that's kind of a different issue in itself when you look at it. The thing is, like, when I look at attributes and when I try and to take sort of a deep dive into this, it's not really I don't look at possession stats and sort of take pride on that, thinking I didn't look at with Enzo ball and looked at the possession and gone, oh yeah, we absolutely dominated. I looked at the amount of chances that we created, the work rates, and I looked at how we carved teams apart. On paper, yes, on paper at first, but then seeing how we then put it into practice, seeing his training drills come to life. Whereas you look to Russell Martin, and the worry is if you move forward with him, he'll just sort of focus on possession and he'll think, oh yeah, we've been dominating games, and then we proceed to lose 3-0 and then figure we can't seem to sort of figure out how's it all gone wrong here. So it's those sort of characteristics. When I was sort of think of Leicester City and its identity, to sort of be a little bit philosophical here, I look at us as a multi-diverse city that accepts everyone in and sets the precedent. You work your ass off here, you belong with us. And when you translate that into stats, and when I want to sort of proceed in how to build an identity from it, I want to see us in the Championship next season. We've got to be the hardest working squad. We've got to be, in terms of distance covered as a team, we've got to be up there. We've got to be, and I want to see that in the Prem eventually. I want to see us be up there in terms of a team that does that. That I can sit here and take pride on, because I looked at us when we won the title and gone, well, we were right up there. And that's something I would sort of sit there and take pride in. So it's not really, the style of play can be an added bonus. I saw us under Brendan, and I saw us dismantle like Unai Emery's Arsenal side, and I just saw us playing the most beautiful football I've ever seen, and it was amazing to see it at King Power. But ultimately, it's still like an added bonus, and then I still look at the end of the season and I look at it up as a whole and go, yeah, but like, yes, we played some good football at times, but ultimately we didn't get to really where we really wanted to be, and that's like at the end of the day, that's all I'll sit here and take from it. I look at it overall.
I mean,
can I pose the question to the crowd?
Yeah.
For Leicester City to move forward as a club, do we need to, from the inside and then onto the pitch, do we need to have a set style of play? I'll use Brighton as the model because they're, we all sort of understand how they operate. Doesn't matter who the manager is. This is how they play. They're wedded to it. For Leicester to get back into the Premier League and then to maintain that and let's hope at some point to push for European football again, is that the way we need to go? Or are we or do we follow I'll use them as the example because they've sort of fluttered. Man United, they have bounced between managers, different styles, chopping and changing constantly, and it's also just left them in a bit of a devastating spot. So I'll go to you firstly, Locks, then. Is that the way you would like to see Leicester City go?
100%, because this is why we always say, on this channel especially, we always say that we've been left behind by clubs like Brighton. And it's because the way they do things just makes sense and it's the most efficient way. The example you used there about Man United, that's why they have players that were signed, a year ago that will probably now be moved on this summer already because they don't fit what the manager wants to do. And that's where we're at, right? So Steve Cooper brought in Oliver Skipp, Jordan Ayew, Bobby D. Cordova-Reid. Our next manager might walk into that dressing room and go, "No chance are you playing for me. You are not what I need. You are not what I want." And for me, that's why the Brighton model, makes so much sense. And I would personally, not talking about the Brighton style of play, exactly, but the structure as we keep talking about, because if you always have an idea of what way you are going to play, what type of manager you are going to have, then you can base your recruitment off of that, and so that's why I think it is the most efficient way. I'll pass it to Anil because I know he feels strongly about this as well.
Just a quick one though. Dan Noel in the comments, in the Championship, most teams will probably sit in at the KP, so we're going to have a lot of possession. Does that being a factor also make it harder for us, though? Because the manager that we want for the Championship isn't the manager we want for the first or second season of the Premier League. And Neil, go on, you can also chime in with that and then something more as well.
Oh, these are great questions. You're actually setting up the preview for next week's How Do We Fix LCFC right up, because this is a really big topic. Because we do basically need to solve two problems at once, which is bloody difficult. Locks really hit the nail on the head, or the head on the nail, as we like to say here on Blue Tinted Glasses, quoting a certain Dane who's not with us today. But it's about efficiency. But I'll give you like a good example. Like, again, this was brought up when I done my badges, and it's something that was like a big thing here in England. So Euro 2004, that was held in both the Netherlands and Belgium. And Belgium were the first ever host nation to go out in a group stage despite hosting the tournament, right? And this was a team that got to third place in the World Cup twice previously. Like when Maradona won over Argentina, they actually beat Belgium along the way. They had a really good team there. So what did Belgian football do? Well, they had this massive change and they decided to implement a style of play that was all the way from the under 8s all the way to the senior team. And they decided to play 4-3-3, technical possession football, interchanging positions, etc., etc. 12 years later, they were the world's #1 ranked team. They'd gone on, I think, an 18-match winning run. And in the 2018 World Cup, they didn't quite pull it off, but they did knock out Brazil. And I think they will admit that they probably should have won that one. And maybe if Eden Hazard had laid off the burgers a bit, they might have actually have done it. Really great team. So that shows you how if you've got a long-term vision and you're committed to it, you can achieve results. Now, as you're pointing out, though, the danger is okay, sure, you stick to the vision, but you know what? It's a bit like you went out with your missus for 5 years and then you realize she wasn't the one. That's 5 years that you've wasted when Carly from next door might have been the one all along, Michael. right? And now think about, you might have had an extra kid with her, right? If you'd have actually just woken up and seen her for what she is. This is definitely not related to anything going on in my personal life or anything like that. But
Don't pin it on me either, please.
but okay, so that is important, and that's something where you do have to recognize that the game is changing. And I have to say that, like, you know, I am generally in agreement. I think Russell Martin probably could quite do well with our squad, but something that worries me about him is that I think he's wedded to an idea that is already starting to phase out of football. And what we're seeing in the Premier League this season is that the teams with the most possession aren't the team that's winning the title. They're not even the team that finished second, right? And we're seeing that physicality is being dominant, and every single team has worked out that as soon as you get the ball back, you need to score within 10 seconds. And I've said that all season long, that that's the weakest thing under Ruud van Nistelrooy, that on transition, we're not good enough. Right? And that's what we need to do. Now, the thing is, and maybe we'll play it at the end of the show, but I do feel that under Maresca, even though we had a lot of games that were boring, the teams that did try and open up against us, specifically Southampton, the reason we destroyed them is we did actually do these transition goals that were really, really good. So he proved that you could do both styles. But to answer your question, yeah, you need to have a flexible manager. You need to develop your players in such a way that you can sort of change your way. But I think the point is, especially at academy level, there are certain things that are always going to be true. So having fast players, always going to be pretty useful. Having fast and strong players, always going to be pretty useful. Having fast and strong players that are also quite technically good, guess what? They're probably also going to be quite good again. And you can, if they're good at one-touch passing and things like that, that's generally going to be quite good. But it's a very difficult puzzle. If everyone could solve it, everyone would be winning all the time, and it doesn't work that way. But that is something that what if you do have in your academy? And you know what? It's interesting. You did mention Ajax near the top of the show. Well, Ajax, if you look at how they played this season, you would not think they're Ajax. They play like such a boring ass style of play. They were to 5 at the back, and they've done it because they've kind of fallen off quite hard recently, and they're trying to get themselves back to the top. But then you're thinking, aren't you just kind of like spitting in the face of everything that you stood for? Like Rinus Michels, Johan Cruyff, these highly technical players coming through the youth system, and now you're not producing them. So
now it's Jordan Henderson.
yeah, exactly. How the mighty have fallen when that's considered your star signing for the summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Ragsy, you know, the example that Anil used there where, you know, I can't remember which country said they got knocked out, and then, you know, because I think we shit the bed. Like I would fear that we start to build something. You know, we have a plan for the next 5-10 years of Leicester City. There's a relegation, let's just say, and then they shit the bed and they go in a completely opposite direction when that might not be what they need to do. The club had a clear vision, right? Well, when I say clear vision, I mean they wanted to go down the more possession-based style of football. They had Claude Puel, they had Brendan Rodgers, obviously a little break there with Dean Smith, and then Enzo Maresca. Bit of a dilemma. Enzo Maresca leaves the football club and goes to Chelsea. We're in a bit of a shit. They could have found somebody else who plays in some way, shape or form similar to Enzo Maresca, but they shit the bed. They shit the bed and they went for Steve Cooper. And that's something that you can't do if you're trying to build something. Because that Steve Cooper appointment set us back a year, 2 years, 3 years.
No, fully agree.
The Steve Cooper, yeah.
Yeah, fully agree. You've got to be, well, forget 100%, 1,000% committed into the philosophy that you want to implement. Otherwise, it's never going to work. Never going to work. It's just a complete waste of time. And the problem is you hire a dork of a director of football and leave it all up to him to think of a replacement for Enzo when he comes up with somebody who's on the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, I could sit here and make it suffice and go, well, okay, it's still like you have Steve Cooper in, he does a job, and you know somehow we stay up. I wouldn't have minded if it was effective, and then we moved back and got rid of him and got like right back on track, knowing that we were an established Premier League club again, and gone out there and got the right manager that would continue on in that philosophy. So it's just a bit more of a hiatus in that way. But you've gone out there and you just hired just someone who ultimately is just not a good enough manager to implement anything, even if it was the style that was just completely against us. So, and this is the worry sort of like heading into the future. It's like, and that sort of, it's really dependent now on the manager. Like people sort of like look to recruitment and stuff, but ultimately especially in our situation where the manager pretty much has to lead in terms of which direction we head in the recruitment, the distribution of our money towards the transfer windows. They have a lot of a say when they're going to like come in at the club, and they've got to implement the vision pretty much because there's no one else on that board that's going to do it. But yeah, it just makes more sense, especially heading into next season. Just going along the set. Oh, here we go. Where's that? Honestly, isn't him and this? Like, honestly, he just Googles random coaches and looks at football.
He's not going to be happy with you. He's not going to be happy with you.
Honestly, just go back into your hole. Anyway.
I was just gonna say. I mean, Michael. Somebody put in the comments what did because the chat are talking about Graham Potter for some reason. Oh yeah, because of the Cooper appointment.
Yeah, well, they were talking about who everyone should have a list and a way we should try and play, and Potter was our vision, right? But
what I was going to say about Potter, Michael. Somebody put, what did he do? Well, he was actually very he was the building blocks for Brighton, because he came in after Chris Hughton, right? That's quite a bit of a shift there. Obviously, they were fighting relegation under Chris Hughton. He kept them up. They sacked him. And I think there was a few people who went, oh, why did they do that? Like they did with Gary O'Neill at Bournemouth, right? But he was actually very important at Brighton because he brought a bit of stability. They were able to then develop the players, and the recruitment obviously came along the way. And then he guided them to, I think it was 9th or 8th, the highest position before he left to go to Chelsea. So maybe we need someone like that, Michael, now, who... I'm trying not to drift into the manager chat too much, but maybe we need someone who's able to come in, implement a style of football, a culture at the club, and bring us a bit of stability for the time being.
Absolutely. And we did, like, let's be honest, we tried to do it with Enzo. It just sort of splashed back in our face. And I know Ragsy's sort of commented on it before. You're like, I don't trust the board to making decisions. They've made the wrong decisions for however many years. One thing they did actually get right was the Enzo appointment. And but do we back them to have another go at that and try something different? Because obviously they just threw it back in our face with Cooper and Rude. We certainly need a manager who's going to stay with us for 5 years. We need a manager who has the success in the Championship and then stays with us in the Premier League, so that he can say to the players, like, trust me. Like, I've gotten you this far. Let me take you further. They never had trust in Cooper. They never had trust in Ruud van Nistelrooy, and impossible task to sort of gain that given the position of the club. I don't know who that manager is though, but I don't believe the manager's Russell Martin, but we're not talking managers, so.
I mean, I know you touched on it slightly, Neil. I mean, do you agree with this? If you have a style of playing the Championship, you've got to throw that out the window if you go up. It's almost like teams need a total reset.
Not quite, but I see what Mike is saying. I mean, as I said to you, like I said at the start of the season, well, this is just right before Enzo went, but I said that the games we played against Southampton the last time we were in the Championship was, for me, the blueprint of how we would have stayed up, which is that a team that was comfortable enough on the ball that they could play their way out of trouble when needed, because all the Premier League teams are going to press the bejesus out of you, but also one that can hit teams really quickly on attack, because we had Patel and Mavadidi, and we showed we could get up the pitch really quick. So we're good on transition, but just accept that we're not going to have anywhere near as much as possession, but don't worry about it. And that would get us points maybe against some of the bigger teams. And then actually, if we then started playing the teams like Ipswich and Southampton, or the teams that are around us, we could resort back to the style that worked in the Championship. So I think if you're clever, you can go for a style that will work against both ways. It just has like a different sliding scales. It is funny though, seeing Enzo, of course, he's about to kick off in the European final, but it's funny how Chelsea were better at the start of the season compared to the end. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is at the start of the season, they were really good on transition, which we saw under Leicester, but they weren't that good at keeping hold of the ball. Then the second half of the season, they've actually now rocketed to the top of the possession statistics, but their attack isn't as good because they haven't quite got that side of it. Now, it'll be interesting to see if he can take it the next, because he's trying to build a team that can do both, right? And absolutely dominate the ball and kill you, which is kind of like what peak Man City will do. We don't know if that's going to work or not. But it's interesting when you kind of talk about these styles, right? Like you mentioned, for example, Graham Potter and how he's done nothing, which I agree with. But I will say that if you try and get like a style of play, it's very difficult to implement that quickly, especially mid-season, especially in the Premier League, with it being as competitive as it is. And I said, even last season, I said, look, hey, look, Maresca, the first thing you got to do is the first 10 games, you can't take too much into it, right? Because he's going to be trying to bed in the style of play and it's probably going to be rough. And then maybe if we're lucky between games 10 and 20, we might start getting quite good at it. And then I might expect around Christmas time for us to start hitting, our stride and looking quite good. And what's kind of funny with Enzo is bloody hell. Burton Albion, we already looked amazing in my opinion. I was seeing all the patterns of play. So we came up really quickly. I think that whole game aside, we won all those games early. And then funny enough, we started falling off at the end. But I think the players were getting kind of tired. So Graham Potter may still prove to be a terrible appointment for West Ham, same as Ruben Amorim at Manchester United. But it's like, if you're going to go for that heavy style of play, you really need that pre-season to get your ideas across and the right people in your squad, etc., etc. So that's something to watch out for. But just kind of coming back to it quickly before I pass back to the panel. But I think one thing that we're not good at doing here, which I think we should really take the club towards, is that, like, say Guardiola is really good, but people may not realize this, but he came in after Frank Rijkaard. Now, Frank Rijkaard for Barcelona won the treble, by the way. He had that team with like Ronaldinho, he had like Thierry Henry at one point, all these sort of players. Messi hadn't even sort of broken through. He was just starting to come through. But he'd have been really successful and he wanted to kind of quit. And at the same time, they had this manager who was managing their under-21 side called Pep Guardiola. And he was proving himself. And believe it or not, Barcelona B, they were in the second division and they were so good that they actually won promotion to the top league in Spain, right? Which you're not allowed to do because you can't have Barcelona playing Barcelona B in the top league. So then they realized that this guy must be quite good, right? So they gave him the job. And then Pep's assistant was Tito Villanova. I don't know if you remember him. And he eventually became the Barcelona manager as well, although he kind of got ill and stuff like this. So my point is that a lot of the top clubs, Ajax do it, Benfica used to do it back in the day as well. I think even Arne Slot came in this way as well at PSV. A lot of these teams, they actually are already not only developing their players, but they're developing their coaches as well. So the idea would be that, like, whoever's looking after your Jeremy Mongers and Jake Evans right now, if you had the situation where Enzo Maresca gets swiped, you go, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just take the guy who's coaching the under 21s is successful with them and he can step up. And what's even better is that he's even worked with some of the players in the senior team because he developed them 5 years ago when they were younger. So that's like a really good model. And that's, again, why if you've got a nice style of play that's running throughout the club, it can be useful. But look, that's in a perfect world, and we don't live in a perfect world, as unfortunately we found out this season.
You need to go. Do you need to go, Michael?
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the podcast, and I'll see you hopefully in a couple of days' time.
Very soon. Yeah. All right, mate. Thank you so much,
Peace,
Michael.
guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Ragsy, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just respond to Manny. He says, never forget who recommended Rude. I mean, what I would say as well is actually Carlos Vicens has been snapped up today by Braga. He's gone to Braga. He's become their manager.
Yeah, know your sources, Manny. Know your sources. So, that's the thing. I mean,
anything you want to say back? He's thrown a bit of shade at you for Ruud van Nistelrooy?
No. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, like, yeah, just moving back onto, like, in terms of what sort of style to go and head into the Championship. Like, I think it's just important to have the foundations and the building blocks just to start with plan A, especially when we're expected to dominate possession in pretty much all 90% of teams in the Championship next season. Go with a possession-based style because it's the one that's the hardest to learn. And it will take months just to sort of adapt to everything, and then bring in the coaches as well, like Anil has alluded to, with youth coaches to boost up the academy, get the right technical directors in, get the right scouts in, everything, and build that infrastructure in and around it. And knowing that we have that, and if we do get promoted from that, yes, we have that as our basis. But then we'd look to other teams and go, well, if they're dominating the ball, the principles will still remain the same. And that's kind of what I looked at Enzo and I really saw a lot of future with. And that's why I was so bummed when he left. And then we just went in completely the opposite direction, because there were games, and I remember it was like Blackburn away, and I just took notice of it. And it was all like, even the players now that we call bums and stuff. And it was just like, we lost the ball, but then 7-8 players ran back to get behind the ball into shape within the space of 4 or 5 seconds. Like, and those are the principles. And that was like just keeping us solid and keeping us compact and stuff, and still having that in place and just being in a shape where, okay, if you can't win the ball back, then at least put yourself in shape where you just nullify the opposition just straight away. And if we keep those principles heading into next season in the Premier League, that would come in useful. We probably have to lean on that a lot more often, knowing that we're going to be coming up against teams that are also going to try and dominate possession as well, and knowing that we still got to go out there and invest in a lot more quality to make it work in the long run. But it is still, in my opinion, the way to go ahead and do it. If we resort to Dyche ball or just someone just like that would just sit in and look on the counter attack, that just is going to come with limitations, and ultimately you're just going to be far too dependent on your strike force and for them to have a really high clinical rate. It's just like it worked when we had like prime Jamie Vardy. It's not going to work now, and like you know, you go with a solid 4-4-2, it just doesn't work in this day and age with football. So overall, in the long run, if we want to see us really truly establish ourselves, it's got to be this way to do it. I'm not sort of fussed on the style of play, but I'm just looking to what's effective, and that, you know, being possession based is the way to go at the minute.
And Neil, did you start this one, mate?
Yeah, I did, just because this is interesting. That if it says this is, we have our under 21s have shone this season. We have Jack Leicester who coaches them in the under 21s, but he's also coached for Chris Wilder. Having that sort of transition man has helped these kids shine this season. I mean, that's very interesting to hear. That is quite encouraging. That is a sort of way we need to go. Like I say, we need to have, you know, like I say, develop our own talent, including the coaching things. Like I think Leicester is always going to be that sort of team. It's going to be a team that does give young players their opportunity, and I also think young coaches. And it's funny how Maresca himself was kind of a young coach, right? And has proved now to go on to Chelsea. So why not go for that model? Like, you know, try and be more on the cutting edge of things, because that's, you know, as a club like us, we've got to try and go that way. If you try and beat other teams at their own game, you're not going to be able to outspend the very best, you know, biggest teams in the league. We just don't have the budget to compete with them.
Can I interject as well? It's almost when we looked at Enzo and we practically, we knew like, he had a little stint at Parma and stuff, but I think for moderating fans' expectations, sometimes just not knowing a past manager's experience can actually be a really good thing. You sort of go into the unknown a bit, so you're more inclined to be like, actually, we don't know what we're expecting, so all we can sit here and do as fans is just to get behind the manager, whatever he sort of rolls out here. Whereas, and this is kind of where you look to the sides now and the board's thinking of it and going, well, yeah, it's quite outdated. I mean, look at Sunderland this season. Like, they hired like a manager, I forgot his name, but from Lorient, and they didn't have a clue about him, his philosophies, his style, whatever. They're in the Premier League now. So now they get to know him, and now he'll make a name for himself. And it's just those managers that like are just a lot more up to date and a lot more willing, or if they're not up to date with their style of football and how football is today, then they'll get to know and they'll learn from it, and they'll have that willingness to go and make those intricate changes and go and push to move that style forward and stuff. So I just think, like, you know, let's expand our options when it comes to like beyond Russell Martin and Sean Dyche here. Let's not like, you know, I know we're heading back onto the manager chat, but let's just try and like open our options a lot more, just scouring Europe if we have to, and just look for what's amenable to our style of play that we feel like he could come in and actually be effective with it. I think like because in all reality, I think we stumbled upon Enzo. I think he was just the best out of the bad lot. And you know, just, I mean, look at the thinking with them appointing.
We were linked with Martin as well.
Like, oh, look, he's got his accreditation through PSV, and they just looked at the two games that they battered us, like Rue batters us in. So it was just like that, like the lack of thinking there, and just the due diligence and care they just don't have. So will they do it? I mean, there's another question.
I think. I mean, you know, we don't need to go back to the whole structure thing we spoke about last night, Neil. But it would probably help having a director of football who believes in a way of playing as well, and that means that we all will go in one direction and one direction only. It feels like John Rudkin's it just goes off pure vibes. Like, he sees Enzo Maresca holding the Champions League trophy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I like him." Yeah. He sees Ruud van Nistelrooy beat us twice. Okay, I like him. You know, he saw Steve Cooper stay up with Forest one season. Okay, I like him. So, but having a director of football, I mean, is it Monchi who was Villa.
Yeah, he's at Villa now with Emery,
Yeah,
but he was
right.
at he's worked with him the whole way through. They're like a dream team, you know. They like to work together. But absolutely, yeah, but that's really good because see the thing is with those two is that he understands what Emery wants to do, so he will go and find these players, and he'll quite often come up with someone who goes, oh, I think you should look at this player, and he goes, oh, really? Okay, yeah, let's try him out. Like he goes, I found this guy. He's called Morgan Rogers. He's playing for Middlesbrough. We can get him for 8.5 million. And he goes, there's no way we could get a player for 8.5 million who's going to be good enough to fit into my system. They sign him, and next thing you know, he's capped for England and he's one of their players of the season. That's what a good director of football and manager combination can do for you. So absolutely. And yeah, I think the thing that kind of terrifies us with Leicester is even now, it's like, how can Russell Martin and Sean Dyche even be in the same conversation? Those are the polar opposites of one another, right? It'd actually make more sense if it was like, okay, your options are Sean Dyche, David Moyes. I'm trying to think of other ones that are a bit more
Steve
kind
Bruce,
of direct.
Steve Cooper.
Yeah, Steve Cooper, Chris Wilder, maybe things like that play a bit more of a direct. Look, I'm not even saying I'm not even trying to hate on that style, even if I personally don't like it. I'm saying at least you'd be like, oh, okay, I can see what they're trying to do here. They're going for that sort of style. We're trying to build the squad for that. So I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it, but it all makes sense. It's all logical. It was the same as last season. It's like when you have Graham Potter or Steve Cooper, you're like, but that's not apples to apples, right? That's two different things. And so I think,
And we were linked with Enzo and Scott Parker at the same time.
I'm glad exactly what I was going to bring up next. Again, it's outrageous how they if it's like between Kieran McKenna and Enzo Maresca. Oh, okay, I get what you're trying to do here, right? They sort of a bit similar of what their sort of approach is.
Dyche and Martin.
Yeah, that's a real worry. That cannot even be a conversation. It's got to be managers who are roughly similar in terms of what they're trying to do, and you should know them. And also, it is also really worrying that we don't seem to Manny keeps popping up with it. It's true, but it's like it does feel that unless agents give us the name of someone, we haven't done our research to find them. Like again, look at Brighton. Roberto De Zerbi, he was coaching like Shakhtar Donetsk, right, in Ukraine, and brings them over. Then they get Fabian Herzler, who's playing in, Bundesliga 2. And what they're more looking is go, oh, look at how this manager operates, right? He's using tactics that are similar to what we're doing. And, just going back to Graham Potter, what he did for Brighton is he made all the players really comfortable from playing out from the back. So that's why when the next manager came in, Roberto De Zerbi even said, he goes, oh, wow, I have to give my former coach a lot of credit here because normally it would take like 8 months just to teach my team how to do this, but I don't have to do it here. That's why I'm getting results so quick. And obviously I think he is the better manager, but, that shows you the importance of succession planning. And as we say, we just don't have as many comments about it, but we just don't have succession planning at Leicester.
I've not really thought about it, properly, Ragsy, until Anil just mentioned it, but he's bang on. It should concern us massively that our two options at the moment are Russell Martin and Sean Dyche. And not because, they're not good managers or whatever, because of how different they are. That should be the most concerning thing, because then that shows that they still don't know. They still don't know which direction. And this is probably, mate, why we're 4 days on since the season ended and Ruud van Nistelrooy is still in his job, because they haven't decided yet what direction to go in.
They don't have a clue. And that's it. All roads sort of lead back to that. And we all sort of we all saw it all come out in the open in regards to that. I don't know who reported on it. I think it might have been Tanner. But when Cooper was sacked and Rudkin led that decision, and Top essentially took control, got in a manager that was, a succession plan, in theory, from Enzo, and overruled him and shown him up. And yet he's still in his role. So it's not even you look at director of football and you go, they're just they have this sort of archaic way of thinking when you actually look at it. And it's now that Anil said it, it's no, you're just looking for an easy option. You're just looking for someone, and it doesn't matter for a manager what they've done in the past. It's just looking at check boxes and going, they've had a bit of Premier League experience. We're simply ignoring the fact that we've just gone we're about to, in the space of a year, hire two of the worst managers that the Premier League has ever seen on win ratios.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have.
And we're about to hire the third worst or the worst.
Yeah, we're about to hire the third worst, and that's not even running through their thinking. They're just looking at it and going, yeah, you know, like they've done a job. Yeah, but how well have they done the job? That it doesn't even compute in their thinking. So if those are the options, then this is why the future's looking bleak. This is why you sit here and you can't, like, as a club, they're not evaluating, they're not learning, they're not looking to reason. It's just a mess. And it's like it's just crazy to see how a football club of such like stature and of the foundations that we're at and we built for ourselves, and we've done so well to have the status that we have, and we're resorting to now just picking off like Southampton scraps
again. Yeah, again. And Neil, I saw you start this one with why is it most English managers struggle in Premier League and don't get a look in at top clubs? I mean, you even look at like Eddie Howe. It's
well,
like
he is starting to break the mold. I think it's a really good question, this, and I think that's the one failure of Dan Ashworth's England DNA project, that it did work for the players, but it hasn't worked for the managers yet. But I will say that I think some coaches now that are coming through, they are walking so others can fly. I actually think Russell Martin's one of them. I don't think he's going to be one of the ones that does get that job, but I think Eddie Howe's like also sort of another predecessor a bit, but like Liam Manning right now, who's just gone to Norwich as well. They are starting to come through there because ultimately, you know, it's not that difficult really, right? If you know the patterns of play and you learn it, there's no reason why your country of nationality should make any difference to whether you can do the job or not, right? It should come down to the fundamentals. In fact, if anything, given that it's the English Premier League, being an English manager should actually be an advantage. It normally is in most other leagues. It just isn't here for some reason. So I think it will change, but I think it's still like 10 to 15 years out. But I do think, yeah, I mean, that's another great example. But then how sad is it that Liam Rosenior, after having, in my opinion, a pretty decent season for Hull, I think they maybe should have got to the playoffs. We're a bit unlucky, but he loses his job, then goes to France and smashes it, right? So he's got to prove himself abroad. Will Still had to prove himself abroad. I think the Championship is now starting to become that kind of ground. But then again, you can say, well, still, why did he have to go to Southampton? Why was he not just taken by a Premier League club immediately, right? That's an interesting one. Yeah. It does, but I get it. Teams don't want to take the risk because there's so much. Look, we say this, but to be honest with you, most teams in the Premier League will look at Leicester City and they'll go, oh my God, this is terrifying. How can a team that won the Premier League, won the FA Cup, be on the verge of Champions League 2 seasons in a row, now look like they completely and utterly fucked it? Now, we know the reasons internally, but I'm saying to the outsider who doesn't know all of the knowledge, they would be looking at that and be terrified. And that's why they will go for a Lopetegui, right, instead of a Will Still, because, well, one of them is managing the Premier League and yada, 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 has got the experience. And I do sort of understand that, right? It's like, we're not just living in an FM world, right? It's not just a case of if you lose, you can save scum and boot it up again and try, right? You know, these are you have ramifications of the decisions that you will make. But I think you will start to see that. But, you know, and then will they get jobs at the elite clubs, which I guess is what Mike is asking. I think it's still some way off that. You know, the one who's most likely will be Eddie Howe, and he's earned it the hard way, really.
I was going to say, like,
when it comes to
go on.
When it comes to like English managers, I think they are given their novelties a bit too quickly. Like, they're sort of fast tracked into positions. Like, take Graham Potter, for example. Like, there was no way he was ready for that Chelsea move at all. And he just like got thrusted into that position, was just thrown out of his depth. He was in a stable framework at Brighton. And maybe after like a couple more years when, you know, Brighton was sort of like steadily climbing up the table as well. You could even argue it with Brendan Rodgers at the time to an extent, after like one good season at Swansea, and then he got thrust into Liverpool too quickly with like in terms of British managers. And they just need a lot more of a stringent, just like baby steps when you look at management to sort of like progress upwards. And yes, like they may have to go abroad, they may have to prove their worth, and then they still like they keep on progressing up. And if they can build a club to get into like a European position, do
you know what, Ragsy? Notice that those managers though that are coming through now, they're not ones that played for top clubs. That's what I think people are realizing, that just because your name's Steven Gerrard, I know Frank Lampard's doing a half decent job at Coventry, but he hasn't done the other clubs. I think that's what they've got to realize, that the modern managers, if anything, the ones that didn't play at the top level are better than the ones that did, because they don't have the ego. They've had to earn their way up like many other sort of like a player kind of thing.
Are you saying Ruud van Nistelrooy is no good? Is that what you're saying?
The evidence speaks for itself, Locks, doesn't it?
Wayne Rooney. Wayne
Yeah,
Rooney.
it's not
Come
stacking
on.
in his favour. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at Kiernan whilst he's not playing at the minute, and he's studying for like how to be a director or something. So like he's sort of using his time wisely as well. Like, not that he's not a good player. It's just like, but
Yeah, he's
got
doing
time
like
on his
football
hands,
management, like not football,
Yeah.
like football. Yeah, something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
well, let's end it with this. Anil, one style that we do know all too well is obviously what we played last season under Enzo Maresca, and I think we've got some clips to bring up, some video. I think, have we?
We do, but talk when I bring it up, and we could talk about
yeah.
it as I play this stuff. I'll just play some. Funnily enough,
Let's
this is
just-
against Russell Martin, which is pretty hilarious.
Oh, great. Our fans won't give him time, Dave. Our fans are impatient. Spoil. Reese keeps saying that. Right, we've got it here. Okay, lovely stuff. So, yeah, here's some Enzo ball.
Well, what we'll see here is a combination of things. So still we've got sometimes the patient play, but as the clips go, you'll also see that we were fast in transition as well, which I think was the really important thing. I mean, it's going to help. This was Fatau's first goal. This is not really so much about patterns of play, but having an absolutely liquid footballer that can do mustard like that. You might remember this. But you can see the defenders here joining in with the attack. That was good. Look how far JJ is up there. Got Mavropanos dropped in there. Well, even Hamza's playing in this game. Oh my God, this is what Enzo can do. He can make Hamza look good. Bosh.
That was apparently the game that some fans are alluding to and going, oh yeah, we just counter-attacked and Enzo hated us counter-attacking. I'm like, well, it's like we had to start with a basis to go and play that, carve Southampton apart because they were just easy to carve through.
See this move there, that started with Southampton trying to press us. So that's why I thought we needed that in the Premier League. You'll have a team like Brentford or whatever trying to come in on you and then you'll play out of your press. And then you see we got from back to front in about 6 seconds once the ball was on. That's why it was an effective start. But I mean, look, you're not going to get away with Vestergaard playing that high up in the Premier League. That's something we found out just this season. But you can see it's fast movement, players interchange positions. You've got lots of people going forwards. I mean, this is a game that we won, I think, by 5 goals, and yet we're not even showing the goals at this point, just showing that the other patterns are played there. We could have scored even more goals than what we did, I guess is what I'm saying, which is, really good.
You mentioned it earlier, Anil, but it was so impressive at how quickly Enzo implemented this as well, because I remember, I know you mentioned one of the very, very first preseason games, but I remember when we played, do you remember when we played Liverpool and we lost, but it was impressive to see what
first 20 minutes was amazing. Yeah. I mean, I said, Lux, at the time, as someone who does it myself, I couldn't believe what I was seeing just because like I'm curious. I genuinely would want to know how he's managed to do it, right? Because with that positional play, players need to know where to stand at the right times. And that can be a really laborious process. Like they do similar to what I do. They'll have like a presentation or they'll like buzz something, say, oh, Lux, you're standing in the wrong position. I need you to go and stand here, etc., etc. And yet somehow, first game of the season, they're all standing in the right places and they're pinging the ball around. So look, to be fair, that's impressive that someone can do it. Yeah, this is good. It's good. That's true. So that is my point. And that's where I think, look, I'm sure I'm not the only one. We're going to probably watch the last European final, in a minute. We'll see how they get on. Will they win or not? Will Anthony get his revenge? We can see. So yeah, someone said as well, it's not necessarily about playing the most passes, but playing the right passes. And I agree with you, Aaron, there as well. Yeah, look how quickly the ball was being played. But that's the thing, is that a lot of people remember, for the most point, Enzo ball being really slow and painful to watch. But the thing is he was just waiting for the other team to commit their press. And as soon as they did it, then he accelerates and play the ball fast. Russell Martin's pretty similar. I will try and find some clips if we do appoint him, but we'll do it. Yeah, and just quickly, this is a good one. Are you worried that we'll get torn apart on transition? Absolutely. Of course I am. That's why Enzo, I think he was a bit unhappy that we didn't have as much possession against Southampton, but that's how he destroyed them. He looked at them and said, this team is stupid. They're gonna invert both their fullbacks, and I've got the 2 best wingers in the league. So I'm gonna let them do it, win the ball off them, and I'm just gonna batter them on the break. And that's what we did. So we'll see if Russell Martin does get appointed. I think in general, his attacking play is good, but the one thing that scares me when he spoke to Gary Lineker is he said, well, what would you change? He said, I will change the formation, but he didn't say he would change playing out from the back. And I'm not sure about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose this is one thing that a lot of people are hoping for, that maybe we would have a better defense or people, better players capable of playing the Russell Martin way. But yeah, Dorgo says most of our players are thick. Before we sign anyone, give them an IQ test.
Not the
I mean,
worst.
it's important. It's important, right?
Yeah.
It is important, of course.
If you want to eliminate the bozo gene, got to think of a way.
That's it, the bozo gene. Right, we are going to end it there because, I want to watch that Chelsea game. Because if Chelsea don't win this somehow, Enzo Maresca's on fraud watch. I'm telling you.
Yeah, but he got to the
fraud
Champions
watch.
League, so I think that he's under no danger now. But it'll be interesting to see with them
Have
because
they not got the fourth best squad though in there?
I would argue they've got a better squad even than the fourth best. But let's see. I mean, at the same time, it's what I'm saying though is that especially with young players and at elite level, it doesn't just normally happen like that. So we'll have to see. But yeah, he could well be on fraud watch. We'll have to see.
It's pretty much a scattergun approach from like summer transfer window. He didn't really get backed in January as well. I think judge him fairly next season because this is kind of like Leicester was the longest stint they had in a job before. So then look at it the second season and go, right, okay, you got that basis. You can go and invest in some quality. Now let's see whether you can really make your methods come to life in the second year. But yeah,
I was going to say, Ragsy, you say scattergun with Chelsea. We'll have to see, won't we? Because it could pay off. Remember Forest only as recent as 2 years ago. All those players they signed, it's paying off to a certain degree because they have had quite a few hits out of them, big bunch of players. So I'm sure Chelsea will have big hits. They've got Estevao as well coming to the Premier League soon. That will be exciting. So anyway, thanks to everybody for joining us. Much appreciated. We've got a video coming out tomorrow, which is a highlight video. I can't remember what it was about this week. What was it about this week? I can't remember. You'll have to find out at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Even I can't remember. So that'll be 5 o'clock tomorrow. But we may well have an emergency stream tomorrow, Friday, Saturday. Who knows?
Friday, it in. Well, I think we're all expecting an emergency stream. My prediction's about 6 p.m. Just going to throw that out there. But it could be any time.
I'm going to go with 10 a.m. just to throw it off.
Wow, 10 a.m. on Friday.
I know.
I've just remembered the highlight video coming out tomorrow is about Russell Martin. So there we go. Of course it is. Right. Cheers, everybody. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to hit subscribe. And we'll see you very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.